Your weight looks steady, and your routine hasn't changed. Yet, that same routine may no longer be telling you what your body is losing. For many older adults, the day still begins the same way. Breakfast feels familiar. Eggs are on the plate, just like they have been for years. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. Meals look balanced. Habits feel steady. Yet somewhere between standing up from a favorite chair and taking the first steps of the morning, the body responds a little differently. It might take a second longer to rise. The legs may feel less certain on the stairs. A short walk can leave you more tired than it used to, even though nothing obvious has changed. For many people in their late 50s, 60s, and 70s, this can feel confusing. You're still eating what you were told was enough protein. You're still following a routine that once worked well, and yet strength seems to fade quietly in the background. This isn't a personal failure. It's not about willpower or discipline. It's about how the body changes with age, often before there's a clear reason to be concerned. As we get older, the body doesn't always use protein the same way it once did. The foods that supported strength in earlier decades may no longer be absorbed or used as efficiently, so even when intake looks the same, the result inside the body can slowly shift. Many older adults notice this first in very ordinary moments. Standing up takes more effort. Carrying groceries feels heavier. Balance requires more attention than it used to. These are not dramatic changes. They tend to appear while life still feels normal. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. A large number of people experience this phase without ever being told why it's happening. And because the routine hasn't changed, it's easy to assume the body is still responding the same way. If you'd like to stay with me, we'll gently look at why a common habit many seniors rely on may no longer be enough, not to replace it and not to alarm you, but to understand what the body may be asking for now. What makes age-related muscle loss so difficult to notice is how quietly it begins. There is usually no pain, no sudden weakness, no clear moment where something feels wrong. Most people don't wake up one morning feeling that their muscles have changed. Instead, the body adapts in small ways that are easy to explain away. You take a little more time standing up, you choose the handrail more often on the stairs, you plan errands with more breaks without really thinking about why. What's important to understand is that this isn't about appearance. It's not about looking thinner or losing tone. The real impact shows up in everyday independence. Muscle plays a quiet but central role in how we live. It's what helps you rise from a chair without hesitation. It's what keeps your steps steady when the ground feels uneven. It supports balance, coordination, and confidence in movement. When muscle slowly fades, daily life subtly reorganizes around it. Chairs feel lower, stairs feel longer. Activities that once felt automatic start to require planning. Many older adults don't connect these changes to muscle at first. They assume it's just part of getting older or simply being more careful. And because there's no discomfort pushing them to act, the shift continues quietly in the background. From a simple biological standpoint, the body is not breaking down faster. It's responding differently. The same meals, eaten the same way, may no longer be used as efficiently as before. Protein is a good example. For decades, people have been told that as long as they eat enough, their muscles will be supported. But with age, the body can become less responsive to the same amount and type of protein it once handled easily. So it's not that the routine is wrong, it's that the body's response to that routine has changed. This is why many people only notice the issue once daily habits begin to shift. When standing up requires momentum, when carrying groceries feels heavier than expected, when walking feels shorter, even if the distance hasn't changed, these moments don't arrive suddenly. They appear while life still feels familiar, which is why they're often overlooked. If this kind of calm, practical guidance feels helpful, you may want to subscribe so these conversations are easy to find again. For a long time, eggs have held a very special place in the American diet. They've been called the perfect protein, simple, affordable, familiar, and trusted for decades. Many people grew up hearing that if you wanted to stay strong, eggs were enough. 2 eggs in the morning felt like doing something right for your body. And for a long time, that belief made sense. The part that often gets missed is how much the body's response changes with age. Not suddenly and not dramatically, but gradually and quietly. At 40, the body tends to respond quickly to protein. At 70, that same protein can be handled very differently, even if the amount hasn't changed. So someone may still be eating eggs regularly, still meeting what looks like an adequate intake, yet strength continues to feel less available than it once was. This isn't because eggs are bad. It's because aging muscles don't always respond to protein the way they used to. As we get older, muscle tissue can become less sensitive to the signals that tell it to use protein effectively. The food arrives, but the message isn't received as clearly as before. In everyday life, this shows up in subtle ways. You eat the same breakfast you've eaten for years. You feel full afterward, but later in the day, your legs still tire easily or your energy fades sooner than expected. It can feel confusing because the habit hasn't changed. The plate looks familiar. The routine feels responsible. What's changing is not the effort, but the processing. The body is simply less efficient at using certain types of protein on their own. This is why many older adults feel like they're doing everything right, yet the results don't match the effort. The issue isn't how much you're eating. It's how the body is handling what arrives. Once that distinction becomes clear, everyday experiences begin to make more sense. The slower rise from a chair, the heavier feeling in the legs after routine tasks, the sense that recovery takes longer than it used to. These are not signs of failure. They're signs that the body is asking for something slightly different now. Once it becomes clear that the issue isn't effort, the question naturally shifts. If the body is responding differently, then the support it needs may also need to change. This is where many people assume the answer must be something complicated. Expensive supplements, special powders, products that promise more than everyday food ever could. In reality, the opposite is often true. What tends to work best for older bodies is not rare or exotic. It's familiar, affordable, and already part of most grocery stores. As we age, the body often does better with foods that are easier to use, not harder to digest. Foods that deliver protein in forms the body can recognize more readily. Foods that come with supporting nutrients that help muscles respond rather than asking them to work harder. This matters because muscle doesn't operate in isolation. It relies on timing, digestion, and how steadily nutrients arrive. Some proteins enter quickly and disappear just as fast. Others arrive more slowly, staying available when the body is actually ready to use them. That difference becomes more noticeable after 60. Two foods may look similar on a nutrition label, yet feel very different in the body afterward. One leaves you full but unchanged. The other leaves you feeling a little steadier later in the day. Many older adults recognize this without putting words to it. A certain meal seems to sit better, energy feels more even, recovery feels less rushed. When researchers look specifically at older adults, only a small number of everyday foods consistently stand out. Not because they're trendy, but because they match how aging bodies process nutrients. They tend to share a few quiet qualities. They're affordable enough to use regularly, they're familiar enough to feel comfortable, and they work with the body, rather than expecting the body to respond like it did decades ago. This isn't about replacing everything you eat. It's about understanding which foods quietly support strength when timing and absorption matter more than volume. Once that lens shifts, everyday choices start to look a little different. One quiet detail often overlooked is when the body actually does its repair work. It isn't during the busy parts of the day. It happens most consistently at night, when movement slows and the body settles. For many older adults, dinner is lighter now than it used to be. Sometimes it's skipped altogether if appetite feels low in the evening. By the time morning comes, the body may have gone many hours without steady nourishment. This is where slower digesting protein becomes relevant. Not because it's stronger, but because it stays available longer. Cottage cheese is a good example of this kind of food. It's simple, familiar, and often already in the refrigerator. What makes it different is the way the protein is released gradually instead of all at once. Rather than arriving in a rush and fading quickly, it lingers. That slower pace aligns well with the overnight window when the body is naturally focused on repair. Many older adults describe the difference in very ordinary terms. Mornings feel a little less heavy. The first few steps out of bed feel steadier. Energy seems to stretch further into the late morning rather than dropping off quickly. These are not dramatic changes. They tend to show up as small shifts in how the day unfolds. A bowl of cottage cheese in the evening doesn't feel like a health intervention. It feels like a quiet habit, yet that timing can matter. because it supports the body while you're resting, not while you're rushing. This is especially relevant after 60, when muscles often respond better to a steady signal than a short burst. The body isn't asking for more effort. It's responding to consistency. Some people notice this most clearly. The next morning, standing up feels smoother. The legs don't feel quite as stiff. The day starts without that sense of needing extra time to warm up. Cottage cheese is also easy to live with. It doesn't require cooking. It fits into a routine without changing everything else. And for many people, that simplicity makes it sustainable. The important point here isn't the food itself, it's the timing and the way the body uses what arrives while you sleep. For many people, protein has always meant something solid and heavy. Meat on the plate, eggs in the pan, meals that feel substantial, filling, and familiar. What's often overlooked is how the body responds to that heaviness later in life. After 60, digestion can slow. Meals that once felt satisfying may now feel like they linger too long. This is where lighter forms of protein can quietly make a difference. Not because they're weaker, but because they ask less from the body. Tofu is a good example. It doesn't demand much effort to digest. It arrives gently, without the heaviness that sometimes follows more traditional protein choices. Some older adults notice this first, not in strength, but in comfort. Meals feel easier afterward. Energy doesn't dip as sharply. The body feels less weighed down in the hours that follow. That lighter feeling matters more than it might seem. When digestion runs smoothly, the body has more room to focus on other work. Movement feels less sluggish. Recovery feels less rushed. For many people, the shift toward tofu doesn't start as a health decision. It starts as a practical one. Swapping a familiar dinner a couple of times a week for something simpler, easier, and quicker to prepare. One person might replace a heavy evening meal with baked tofu and vegetables. Nothing else changes. Portions stay reasonable. The routine stays familiar. Over time, the difference shows up quietly. Less afternoon fatigue. A steadier feeling during evening walks. A sense that the body is cooperating rather than pushing back. This isn't about giving something up. It's about noticing how the body responds when meals feel lighter but still nourishing. Plant-based proteins like tofu also tend to come with supporting nutrients that the body recognizes easily. They don't arrive alone. They come with elements that help muscles respond without strain. Some older adults describe it this way. When the food feels lighter, the body feels more willing. That willingness matters, because after 60, how the body responds can be more important than how much arrives. There's a time of day many older adults recognize without thinking much about it. The early afternoon feels heavier. Energy fades, even if the morning started well. For years, this has often been accepted as normal, a natural dip, something to work around with a shorter walk, a longer rest, or a quiet afternoon. What's easy to miss is how closely this feeling is tied to the way energy arrives and how quickly it disappears. Not to age itself, some meals deliver fuel all at once. They feel satisfying at first, then fade just as quickly. When that happens, the body doesn't feel supported for long. Chickpeas offer a different kind of experience. They combine protein with a steady source of energy that unfolds slowly rather than rushing in and out. For many people, this shows up in a very practical way. Lunch feels filling without feeling heavy. The afternoon unfolds with fewer dips. Movement later in a day feels more available. This matters because muscles don't only rely on protein, they also depend on consistent energy to do their work. When energy comes and goes too quickly, the body feels drained even if intake looks adequate. Some older adults notice the shift when chickpeas replace more refined foods at midday. A salad with chickpeas instead of white bread. A warm soup that feels grounding rather than draining. Nothing dramatic changes. The routine stays familiar, but the afternoon feels less like something to get through. That steadier energy can quietly support movement. Walking feels less effortful. Carrying groceries feels more manageable. Hands feel a little more reliable when lifting everyday items. This is not about eating more. It's about how long the body can use what arrives. Chickpeas also tend to feel gentle on digestion. They don't rush. They don't spike and crash. They support the body in a way that feels calm and sustained. When energy lasts, muscles are less likely to feel depleted. And when muscles aren't constantly running on empty, fatigue doesn't have to define the afternoon. As we move through our 60s and 70s, portions often become smaller. Appetite changes. Meals don't need to be as large to feel satisfying. What matters more now is how much nourishment fits into those smaller portions. Not volume, but density. Canned sardines are a good example of this shift. They come in a small serving, yet feel surprisingly sustaining. A modest amount can leave the body feeling supported rather than drained. Many older adults notice this during familiar activities. A bit of time in the garden, a walk around the neighborhood, tasks that use the body gently but consistently. The effort itself isn't usually the problem. It's how the body feels afterward. With some meals, the activity feels fine, but recovery lingers. Legs feel heavy later. Energy fades sooner than expected. The body seems slow to reset. Foods like sardines tend to change that experience quietly. Not by making movement stronger, but by helping the body feel steadier afterward. The next day doesn't start with as much stiffness. The body feels more ready to move again. This is an important distinction. Strength isn't only about how much force muscles can produce. It's also about how well the body recovers after using them. For many people, sardines become part of a simple routine. On crackers at lunch, alongside vegetables at dinner, no preparation, no complexity. Because they're nutrient dense, a small portion often feels sufficient. There's no sense of heaviness, just a feeling that the body receives something useful. Some older adults describe it as feeling more durable. They can use their muscles without feeling as worn down afterward. Guarding doesn't linger in the legs as long. Evening walks feel less like a final effort. This kind of recovery support becomes more noticeable with age. When muscles are asked to do less, but asked more often, how they bounce back matters. Small portions that do more work can quietly change how the body feels day to day. Morning is often when changes are felt most clearly, not in dramatic ways, but in the first few minutes after waking, standing up from the bed, taking those initial steps toward the kitchen, noticing whether the body feels steady or hesitant. For many older adults, breakfast has become lighter over the years. Toast, cereal, something quick and familiar. What's rarely discussed is how that first meal shapes the rest of the day. Not just energy, but stability. Millet is one of those foods that tends to show its effect early. It doesn't rush into the system. It settles in slowly, offering energy that unfolds instead of spiking. People who include millet in the morning often describe the difference in very simple terms. The body feels grounded when standing up. Legs feel less shaky on the first steps. There's less urgency to sit back down. That early steadiness matters more than it seems. When the body starts the day feeling balanced, movement tends to follow more naturally. Walking feels smoother. Tasks feel less demanding. Millet works quietly because of how it releases energy. Rather than a quick lift followed by a drop, it supports the body at an even pace. This is especially noticeable after 60, when sudden changes in energy can feel more disruptive. Some older adults switch from refined breakfast foods to a warm bowl of millet without changing anything else. Same morning routine, same activities planned for the day, yet the morning feels different. There's less rushing, less hesitation when standing or turning. The body feels ready rather than cautious. This kind of stability carries forward. Energy doesn't disappear mid-morning. Movement remains available longer. Confidence stays intact through ordinary tasks. Millet doesn't announce itself. It simply supports the body quietly from the very start of the day. Strength doesn't usually announce itself in big moments. It shows up quietly in the small actions repeated every day. Twisting open a jar, lifting a pan from the stove, carrying groceries from the car to the kitchen without stopping. These movements rely on more than just muscle size. They depend on coordination, steadiness, and how well the body supports repeated use. Muscles fit into this picture in a very practical way. They provide protein in a form that feels substantial yet easy to work with. Alongside that, protein comes a blend of nutrients that many older bodies seem to respond to comfortably. People who add muscles occasionally often notice changes first in their hands and arms. Grip feels more reliable. Movements feel less tentative. Tasks don't require as much adjustment or caution. This isn't about doing more. It's about doing the same things with less effort. In the kitchen, that can mean lifting a pot without thinking twice. At the table, opening containers feels simpler. Around the house, everyday chores don't linger in the hands afterward. These small signs matter because they shape independence. When hands feel steady, confidence follows. And confidence makes movement feel natural instead of deliberate. Muscles also tend to fit well into simple meals. They cook quickly, they don't require heavy preparation. A small portion can feel satisfying without feeling overwhelming. Some older adults notice the difference not during the meal, but later. Hands don't feel as tired. Arms recover more quickly. The body feels ready to use again rather than needing extended rest. This kind of support becomes more noticeable with age, not because strength disappears, but because recovery matters more. When the body can handle repeated small tasks comfortably, daily life stays flexible. And flexibility, more than force, is often what keeps routines intact. At this stage of life, it's easy to focus on the big nutrients, protein, calories, meals that look complete on the plate. What often goes unnoticed are the smaller elements that quietly shape how the body feels, not in strength alone, but in lightness and coordination. Nori seaweed fits into this quieter category. It doesn't add much weight to a meal. It doesn't make you feel full, yet its presence can be felt in subtle ways. For many older adults, the first change isn't obvious at the table. It's noticed later, during movement. Steps feel lighter, transitions feel smoother. This is where trace minerals matter, not in large amounts, but in the right balance. They help the body communicate more clearly with itself. Some people notice this when turning quickly in the kitchen. Others feel it when bending down and standing back up. Movements feel less stiff, less hesitant. Nori doesn't overwhelm the system. It slips in quietly, offering what's often missing rather than more of what's already there. That's why a small amount can feel meaningful. A sheet added to soup, crumpled over rice, wrapped around vegetables. The body doesn't respond with a surge, it responds with ease. For many older adults, that ease shows up as flexibility. Not stretching farther, but moving more naturally. Not trying harder, but feeling less resistance. This kind of support often goes unnoticed because it doesn't announce itself. It simply makes everyday movement feel less effortful. Sometimes the body isn't asking for more. It's asking for what fits. As the years go by, many people notice they simply don't eat as much as they used to. Portions shrink. Appetite becomes more selective. Meals are lighter, sometimes by necessity, sometimes by preference. What often changes along with that is how the body feels during movement. A walk that once felt easy may now require more pacing. Stairs can feel more demanding, even when taken slowly. This is where nutrient density begins to matter more than volume. When you're eating less overall, each bite carries more weight. Spirulina fits naturally into this picture. It doesn't replace meals, it quietly complements them. Because it's concentrated, a small amount can feel noticeable over time, not as a burst of energy, but as a steadier feeling during everyday movement. Some older adults first sense the difference during walks. The legs don't feel as heavy midway through. Breathing feels less strained on gentle inclines. There's less of that urge to stop sooner than expected. Others notice it on stairs. Not that the steps disappear, but that the body feels more capable of finishing without hesitation. This matters because fatigue often isn't about effort alone. It's about whether the body has enough support to keep going. When meals are smaller, gaps can form quietly. Not obvious deficiencies, but subtle shortfalls that show up as tiredness rather than hunger. Adding something concentrated can help fill those gaps without forcing the appetite. A small scoop mixed into a smoothie, a teaspoon stirred into water or juice. Nothing about the routine needs to change dramatically. The day stays the same, the pace stays gentle. Over time, movement begins to feel less like something to manage and more like something the body's willing to do. This isn't about eating more, it's about making what you do eat count. Evening is often when the body speaks most clearly. Not loudly, but persistently. The legs feel heavier as the day winds down. Feet ask to be elevated. Sleep is interrupted by sudden tightening or discomfort that pulls attention back to the body. Many older adults come to see these moments as just part of the day ending. Something to stretch through, something to wait out. What's easy to overlook is how closely these nighttime signals reflect what happened earlier, not just activity, but how the body was supported throughout the day. Earth almonds, also known as tiger nuts, tend to show their value here. They're small, naturally sweet, easy to overlook, yet they carry a combination of minerals and steady energy that the body seems to recognize. Not all at once, but gradually. Some people notice a difference first at night. Legs feel less tense when settling into bed. The body relaxes more easily. Sleep feels less interrupted. Others notice it earlier, in the late afternoon. There's less of that dragging feeling in the legs. Standing up after sitting doesn't feel as heavy. This matters because muscles don't work alone. They rely on a steady background of support to contract and relax smoothly. When that support runs low, the body often signals it quietly later in the day. Earth almonds don't act like a stimulant. They don't create a surge. They simply help energy arrive and stay longer. A small handful in the afternoon can feel grounding. Not filling, but steady. The body doesn't rush and it doesn't crash. Over time, those small nighttime signals can soften, not disappear, but lose their urgency. The legs feel more settled by evening. Sometimes the body tells its story after the lights go out. Listening there can explain a lot about the day that came before. By this point, a pattern has likely become clear. What tends to support the body best later in life isn't louder or heavier. It's steadier. Teff grain sits at the top for that reason. Not because it stands out on the shelf, but because of how consistently the body seems to respond to it. Teff is small, almost easy to miss. Yet once it becomes part of a routine, many older adults describe a quiet sense of endurance. Not bursts of energy, but the ability to keep going without feeling depleted. This shows up most clearly during movement. Walking feels more even. Pacing stays steady rather than fading halfway through. The body feels less like it's borrowing energy from tomorrow. That steadiness matters because after 60, it's not just about strength. It's about how long that strength stays available. Teff provides a balance the body often appreciates. Protein that feels usable, energy that arrives gradually, minerals that support movement without drawing attention to themselves. Some people notice the difference when standing for longer periods. Others feel it while walking up a gentle incline. The effort is still there, but it doesn't escalate as quickly. What places Teff higher than the others is how complete that experience feels. Not intense, not dramatic, just reliable. In everyday life, reliability is what allows movement to feel natural again. It's what lets routine stay intact without needing constant adjustment. A small grain doesn't promise much at first glance. Yet over time, its value becomes clear in how the body carries itself through the day. Sometimes, what looks modest is exactly what the body has been waiting for. By now, it's clear that nothing here asks you to change everything at once. The real shift is quieter than that. It's about meeting the body where it is today, not where it used to be. As the years pass, the body responds differently to the same routines, the same meals, the same movements. That isn't a failure, it's simply information. What matters is noticing those signals early while they're still subtle. A change in how steady a walk feels, how long energy lasts through the afternoon, how the body settles at night. Each person responds in their own way. What feels supportive for one may feel neutral for another. That variation is part of aging, not something to correct. Small adjustments made with awareness often fit better than big overhauls. A different choice here. A lighter option there. Nothing forced. When the body feels heard, it tends to cooperate. Movement becomes less of a negotiation. Daily life feels more fluid. You're welcome to subscribe if you'd like more steady, science-grounded guidance like this, shared at a pace that respects how life feels now. If moments like these feel helpful, you're welcome to return whenever you want calm, steady guidance. This space is here for listening, not rushing. The body is always communicating. The question is simply whether we pause long enough to notice.